I have no scheduled spaces still. So, okay, don't know what I need to do to get this, to get the what I do have is in the topics. So now we used to just say like technology would be a topic, but now you have to pick which subset of technology. Do you have a bad feeling about where this is going?
Kind of. I mean, I feel like this is going to be we're going to be immediately into crypto.
Not only are we immediately into crypto, it is like of the 25 topics that you can have a space on, like 18 of them are different specific currency.
That's exciting.
It's like, come on.
I mean, the spaces I've seen that have like 2, 5, 10,000 people of them have all been crypto spaces. And have you been to the profile tab in Twitter recently?
No.
I should let it be a surprise. But there's some prompt that I swiftly clicked through that I think lets me use my NFTs as my profile or something.
Yes. Okay. You can become a hexagon.
Good.
Yeah, and this is good. You've basically been like off Twitter for the last 72 hours.
No, I'm just very selective, and I block a lot of keywords.
You're very good. I'm impressed. Is this from, you know what? Okay, point of principle, but maybe a bad one. I don't block anybody. Maybe I should. I don't. I do, including people who hate my guts and love to tweet about it. It's like, you'd think I would at least, but I don't know. For whatever reason, I just don't do it. What I do, I have muted a very small number of people where it's like, I literally just can't take it anymore. And I went into my mutes. I have muted Mr. Peanut.
Well, he does have a lot of ads, as I recall.
I literally wouldn't know. And I do remember just being like begging for mercy from Mr. Peanut. Mr. Peanut, I cannot, we are past the point of actionability with respect to my peanut consumption. And we need to stop bombarding you with ads. I don't even know. Do you get Mr. Peanut ads? Are those targeted? I don't know.
No, I mean, I got to go look and see if I've blocked or muted, because unlike you, I don't have a principle around not blocking or muting.
I don't know if it's a principle. I do feel that it is very lame when you have people that are celebrities that are using block lists to indicate the people they disagree with. I think that's annoying. But I say that as someone who's like on those block lists. So
me too. I had this moment where I'm like, well, I guess Mark Andreessen isn't on Twitter. It's like, no, he's on Twitter, you idiot. He just blocked you for reasons I have no idea.
So he's blocked me as well, obviously. And I do not know why he has blocked me for so long. I don't know that it's even discoverable why he's blocked me. I don't know if we can even figure it out.
That's right.
And I'm such a chicken, because I ended up pitching Andreessen on Oxide, like in a one-on-one conversation. And I should have been like, hey, can I just ask you a question? Why do you block me?
Do that after you raise the money. Be like, hey, funny story. Thanks for the money.
Thanks for the money. Well, yeah, that story didn't work out that way. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for cheering me on from the sidelines. But can I ask you a question?
So how did you come across this blog post?
The hype thing was just kind of going around. And I do feel, and obviously I don't want to spend any time on the Web3 brain fungus, but clearly the fact that I'm saying that is just, right. I feel like we are all collectively as technologists transfixed. And I felt like Kelsey, did you go back and re-listen to our predictions? Well, you obviously must have that.
I read through a bunch of them, but I did not listen. I listened back to it like the night after I recorded it, but not since.
Kelsey was so good.
He's terrific.
I mean, I was like, everyone was great. Like Tom was great, Laura was great. All the predictions were great. But Kelsey I just thought it was really, really interesting going back and re-listening to it. And the other thing that I just cannot get out of my brain that I thought was a really interesting comment, but one that we didn't dwell on, is where Stephen O'Grady likened the movement of Web3 to the commune movement of the 70s.
That is great.
Yeah, and I just felt like, where you had all this tumult of the 60s and, the people kind of taking out those angst in, becoming very agrarian and getting kind of I mean, it's like, in many ways, like, it's the exact opposite, but it kind of represents some of this anyway. So I think we are all collectively trying to reason about this thing because it's so different than anything that we have seen. And it just different in that the level of hype is so next level. And yet the people that dig have a lot of questions that aren't really being answered. I thought Kelsey did a great job of answering those. I did follow Kelsey into a space talking about crypto. And have you been in any of these like super pro crypto spaces?
Yes, but it like not for long, and often I find them sort of almost unintelligible. Like there's a shorthand and a language in some of these that I find indecipherable.
And it is, I agree with that, indecipherable. And the indecipherable, and that's like not praise, just to be clear, indecipherable in a pejorative sense. But Kelsey was really trying to like ask some really good questions that are tough questions, but he's asking in a really like friendly way. But they were not being answered very well. And I'm like, I just cannot take this anymore. I got to leave. And then I've got Nahum, who's here, is DMing me, being like, "That is the last time I follow you into a space." I'm like, "Look, I'm sorry." That was a mess. And then several, like maybe a couple of hours later, Nahum sent me a link to a space that Kelsey had started on, like, I've changed my mind on cryptocurrency. I'm like, oh my God, what happened to Kelsey?
Oh no.
Yeah, and it's like when I last left Kelsey, he was like trying to make rational arguments. It was just being like just making no progress, and like something like collapsed in like in the 3 hours, it's like, or whatever. And so, did you see the space, Adam? And I would.
No, I didn't.
It was just a rickroll. It was really great.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was yeah, exactly right. It's like sanity is restored, and
yeah.
So
yeah, this was going to be like we're going to need to stage an intervention or something. Yeah,
we're going to see, and I think that. So I feel that. So this blog entry is like a kind of taxonomizing hype. Is something that I saw yesterday that had been kind of kicked around earlier, and I feel that this is again what a lot of us are trying to do, of just trying to make sense of this thing and trying to systematize it. So I thought this was a really interesting. I mean, I thought this was an interesting way to think about it. And
yeah, I really liked it when you kicked it over, and obviously this, it sort of unfortunately it starts. The graphically starts at the most severe height,
yeah.
which so it didn't kind of slow roll me into it. But as soon as I saw the term othering, I could not help but associate that with Web3 and crypto, right? This notion that not only will this lead us to utopia, and not only is this imbued with magical properties that make no sense, but to think otherwise is illogical.
I'm going to regret. Are you familiar with Roko's basilisk?
No.
Oh no. I was afraid that was going to be the answer because.
Oh no.
So Roko's basilisk is the idea that the artificial general intelligence is coming, and that the first thing that it will do when it gets post-singularity is it will simulate all of past humanity to determine who accelerated its arrival and who impeded it. And it will reward those that aided the AGI in its arrival, and it will punish those who did not.
Makes sense.
Right, exactly, makes sense. So the talk about like your othering. I mean, you do get to the point where like, okay, we are definitely talking about something. We are no longer in the realm of technology here. We're theological.
Yes, absolutely.
We're talking about the rapture. But I think it is worth talking about like past. So, all right, I'm hoping that we can be done with Web3 for the moment. I know. I'm sorry that I.
No. I think we got it out of our system, at least for the moment.
At least for the moment. I know. God, brain fungus. But I wanted to go back through because obviously we do see this a lot, and I like this way of kind of taxonomizing it, starting with certainly marketing claims and exaggerated returns at level 1 and level 2, which we've seen a lot of. I feel utopian futures, we've seen more than one, and then magical thinking. I can think of at least one example, but I'm going to be very curious if you've got other examples that you're thinking of.
I would say, as I've been, as you DM me this earlier today, and as I've been thinking about it, I am a little worried that this is like a massive troll of yourself. Like we're going to be pulling up these things that you have ranted against for years.
Like some sort of like super rant.
That's right.
Well, no, okay. So actually, then maybe we should start with this. Like, let's start with not the things that did live up to the hype, but the things that were hyped and, if anything, underhyped. What were the things that like people were enthusiastic about that have over-delivered on that enthusiasm? And again, I've got a couple of those in mind. Maybe you've got a couple of those in mind too.
No, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I'm for sure. I think cloud computing is hyped.
Oh yeah. That's a great point.
And there were certainly people who believed at the time that cloud computing was being overhyped, and I don't think it really was. I think it's if anything, it is a much more profound impact on computing than we thought it would be.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. Matt, I don't know if you were trying to get in there.
I mean, just to start off with, like, are things okay out in San Francisco?
No,
like, are they putting
no,
things
are very bad. This is a cry for help.
There are bitcoins falling from the sky.
It's funny you say that,
in
Matt.
harmony on smart contracts.
Matt, I literally was in San Francisco yesterday and drove by on a poster that promised $1 million in Bitcoin. I don't have the details, but I took a picture. But I'll send it around.
It is like, and if you drive right now through downtown San Francisco, it is just disconcertingly on brand. The billboards these are billboards that used to be on the 101 back in the day in Silicon Valley have all moved north, and they're all in the epicenter of San Francisco. And there are, I don't know if half are crypto related, but a lot are crypto related. Yeah. So on the underhyped, I think arguably mobile was underhyped.
Yeah, I was wondering what you thought about we talked about iPhone and your perhaps prescient iPhone prediction from years ago. But yeah, I think that kind of snuck up on us to a degree. Certainly. Yeah. The fact that it is what it is now, I think nobody predicted, or those who did predict it were dismissed as overhyping.
Another one that maybe was like not necessarily overhyped, maybe it was like adequately hyped. Wi-Fi. Do you remember? You were the first person I knew who used Wi-Fi.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I feel like I worshipped at the Wi-Fi altar almost instantaneously.
Yes, you definitely did. And I remember just being like, "This is crack cocaine. This stuff. This is amazing. Like, look, my hands. They're all around my laptop. There is no wire."
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I got that first titanium PowerBook or whatever the fuck it was, and I was very, very excited about being able to sit outdoors and type. I don't know why that was so fascinating to me, but it was everything.
No, it was amazing, and I don't know why my brain conflates these two, but this was also about the same era in which you broke all your hands.
that was a little bit later, and it was only one hand that I broke. Actually, it was just one metacarpal, but yes.
Are you sure you didn't break everything? I just remember you only being able to type with one finger from each hand. Is that not correct?
It is. So it's almost correct. So I broke the fourth metacarpal on my right hand. So my whole right hand, I had 3 pins in my hand, and I could basically type with one finger on that hand. And my left hand was fine. I would note we were building dtrace at the time, and you can type dtrace entirely with your left hand.
That's right. It was originally called JKLIO.
That's right. But to accommodate me, we're like, what can we do? Only the left hand.
Jaquia has to change its name. Yeah.
And I know you refer to it as robot hand because it looked like I was being assisted by a robot, like a pick and place machine on the right side.
A meat stack pick and place machine, world's worst but most entertaining pick and place machine. I did used to like to watch you type. It was. I mean, on the one hand, it was your personal.
Yeah, morbid. Yes.
Yeah. More like I knew I was ashamed for not being ashamed of watching you type. But so I for whatever reason associate that with Wi-Fi, and that the
Yeah. All right.
And I don't even recall ever being like, I don't know if, like I said, was Wi-Fi hyped, but Wi-Fi was like a really big deal, and that was a really neat transition. Um, the okay, where does Java land?
Yeah, right. I mean, it certainly felt crazy overhyped at the time. Crazy over, like, write once, run anywhere. Swing UIs were somehow going to not be the ugliest thing ever, but going to be pervasive and fine.
And I mean, I think we got into level 3 on Java, and at least Java on Silicon is arguably level 4.
Yes.
Where
I mean, write once, run anywhere has kind of won, and UIs that don't look like the native host system have also won with Electron. So it was kind of like right idea, wrong implementation.
well, and I think that this is what kind of I asked about Java, because it's like Java also like definitely succeeded in many different angles, and like I think it. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, say what you will about Java, you can like it or hate it as a language, but the fact, I mean, it's got to be, in the top 3 or 5 of the most lines of code per year, or however you want to measure it. I mean,
it also runs in a really just unconscionably large number of places.
Yeah.
Including somehow SIM cards all running Java.
But I think, but the hype level of Java was exaggerated for sure, and we're hitting some utopian futures. But it also ultimately lived up to at least some aspects of it, if not maybe even many or most.
Yeah, certainly some pieces of it. I was wondering what you thought about Windows NT.
Ooh,
something that we've talked about on the show. Read a lot about, but both of our sort of college, high school, early adulthood was tainted with the specter, at least a utopian future.
Yeah,
of Windows.
I was just going to point out that level 3 is supposed to be utopian futures, not dystopian futures. I don't even think like Microsoft was pretending that it was a utopian future. Microsoft is just like, no, our dystopia is inevitable. I just don't.
That's right. Just we all need to come to terms with it. Like our terrible future is gonna win.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it was like hype versus dread. Honestly, I mean, people are just kind of acceptance
of the inevitability of
it. So I get a couple of storage related ones to ask you. Dedupe. Where does deduplication? Where does that come out in all this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so how? I mean, that feels more like an exaggerated returns. I think.
Right. I think so too. Yeah.
Because I think it was pretty mildly hyped, and I feel like kind of as a busted flush right now. Like I don't think like dedupe doesn't really feel that real to me right now.
Do you actually know anybody who runs dedupe anymore?
I don't feel I know anyone who runs like a SAN or NAS anymore.
Yeah,
so
I'm like,
I don't think
I don't think I hang with the right kind of nerds anymore. Yeah. It's like it's clearly important for some things. Like I think that folks like if you're hosting a bunch of Windows VMs, that's still important.
But like disk is cheap.
Yeah, agreed.
It's just so comically cheap that like, right? I mean, a petabyte is like $50,000.
Well,
or maybe the kinds of things that were most effective are becoming diminishingly small parts of what you store.
That's right, and I also think that because deduplication kind of has at its premise that you have a lot of duplicated data, and it's like, well, but if out of curiosity, like if I have smarter software systems. Or certainly in a world where a lot of that looks compressed or encrypted or looks more like signal or looks like images or looks like video. It's like, well, all that stuff is not really.
Or in a world where you have smart snapshotting on your VMs and or data sets, like ZFS and dedupe don't really make sense as a combination.
We're sorry. We actually put a dialog box to try to attempt people to not actually enable it. That was a classic example of something that was done a little too elegantly. That was done in insufficient number of lines of code.
Yeah.
I also have to ask, since you guys were there, the ZFS copies attribute.
And copies, yeah.
Yes, go on. Ask your question.
I have many questions.
Adam, do you recall the wager that we had in the office?
No, I don't. Did I win? Sounds like not.
Maybe for purposes of this story, I can't. No. Okay, so then you're not going to be able to check me if I get this wrong. But so we had analytics coming from our storage product telling us which features were used when, and what we felt that n copies, setting copies to so copies equals a number more than one, creates effectively spurious copies of your metadata. I mean, I don't feel I'm pitching it this very well, but I don't. There's a great way to pitch it.
Yeah, I think
sounds about right.
I think it was of your data, right? Because n copies of because we actually, as I recall, already implicitly had n copies equals 2 on some internal metadata.
Yeah, I thought it was taking spurious copies purely of metadata, but it was copies above and beyond what you ever doing with RAISY 2 or mirroring.
Yes, absolutely. It was above and beyond the like replication of RAID or mirroring or whatever.
And we're already checksumming what's on the block, and it didn't really make sense. So the other thing that we had that didn't make sense was we had IB as a target, and what were the two ICER, and what was the other IB? ICER and ICER is ISER. And what was the other iSCSI? That is ICER stands for iSCSI extensions for RDMA. So literally 2 of the letters in that acronym stand for other acronyms. And actually, because one of them is iSCSI, actually this is that letter expands twice.
Yeah.
And then I cannot remember the other rival IB standard, but the question that we had,
SRP.
Tom, for the win.
There it is. Ding,
that
ding,
is,
ding, ding.
It's SRP, and I think we had SRP in the product, if I recall correctly. We thought that both of these things were not well informed, and so the question that we had was. And we knew that 0 customers had turned on either of these things. That 0 customers that were connected to us, and that was basically all of our customers. We had really good data on what our customers were doing, which is really interesting. Is this ringing a bell now, Adam?
Yes, ringing a bell, but I don't remember.
So if I recall correctly, Schrock and I had a bet about which one was going to be used first. And I can't remember who's on which side of the bet, and it doesn't hugely matter because both numbers went from 0 to 1 on the same day. And we're like, has the same customer, are we being pranked by a single customer who is turning on both of these questionable features? And as it turns out, they were like just different customers that were turning, different single solitary customers that were turning on these features.
Go figure.
But yes, so no, I don't know. I don't think it was hyped because I don't think people really knew about it. But below InfiniBand, where does that come out on InfiniBand was very hyped in its era.
Yeah, I feel like my lens on InfiniBand was so tainted inside of Sun because it felt like such a big deal inside of Sun, and I don't really know how big of a deal it was outside.
I feel it was pretty. Intel was certainly making a big deal out of it.
Yeah, it was overhyped, but it's firmly entrenched in the HPC world.
Firmly entrenched in the HPC world, which is kind of where it landed. And so it's hard to know whether it's like, well, did this thing I think it is fair to say.
Well, I mean, it's also tough to pitch InfiniBand and RDMA if your architecture is microservices, right? If your architecture is giant shared memory compute, InfiniBand starts making much more sense. But if everyone's throwing REST APIs at each other with reckless abandon, InfiniBand doesn't really do much of anything for you.
It doesn't, and then I would add to that. It's a lot of there's a lot of work, a lot of yak shaving to set this thing up. and that the people who don't value their labor, which is to say national labs, seem to have a stronger affinity to InfiniBand than commercial customers who actually like, listen, we have a job to do. We're actually just trying to get this thing to kind of do stuff for us.
Well,
I put it in the category of a system area network where all the endpoints have to be very homogeneous for anything to make sense.
Well, and also, I mean, for a big enterprise network, you assume that you have heterogeneous machines continuously being upgraded. The machines may be diverse. They're definitely running diverse workloads. If you're building a supercomputer and every node is identical, and you care about being able to treat this thing as one giant shared memory machine, so your software people don't like completely have their heads catch fire because TCP is not reliable.
Those are the conditions in which it makes sense. But those were not the conditions under which it was. It definitely was at the level 1 or level 2 at least of hype, I would say. I don't think InfiniBand ever rose to utopian futures, but I definitely think it had marketing claims and exaggerated returns for sure.
Well, for another Intel technology.
Ooh, yes. Which one on my list are you picking?
I know. I was wondering if you could guess, but I'm going to go first with
Optane.
3D crossplane.
Optane, yes, Optane. Nice.
Yeah, where do you think that reached? Because I feel like it kind of blew a DUI on the hype scale.
Oh, absolutely, definitely. Yes. It definitely was at a level where it should not have been driving for sure. It was at a hype level where it should have gotten a designated driver. Yeah, no, I think it was getting, up there. Certainly up to utopian futures. I'm not sure quite to magical thinking, but Optane, and it is, it's kind of a sad saga to watch unfold because it was so heady. And then every time you kind of ask for an update for it, it was pretty clear that it was just not fulfilling certainly not fulfilling the great ambitions of Intel with respect to, and we don't even know like how it actually works. Intel refuses to say that this is phase change memory, even though it clearly is.
Well, and for the longest time, they couldn't make it.
Yes.
Right? Like it was not available in any kind of reasonable quantity.
I mean, if you look at the pricing today, I'm pretty sure they still can't make it. And if you look at the performance, I believe what everybody thinks they're doing is they're running a DRAM cache in front of an SSD, and they've just built a really nice integrated controller that sits in a DIMM slot.
Well, and it is interesting how they started off being like, we are going to be faster than DRAM and persistent. It's like, okay, great, that's exciting. It's like, we're going to sit between DRAM and flash. Like, we are now faster flash. It's like, wait a minute, I thought, what just happened? It's like,
except, the economics don't make sense. So as long as you have a problem that needs slightly faster SSD and you're willing to pay a 4x premium.
But this actually does remind me of something I did not have written down. The memristor and the machine from HP.
Oh, boy.
I mean, that's got to be... I mean, we've all kind of done HP the dignity of let's just forget that ever happened. What the hell happened to that thing? I mean, that was definitely... I mean, did you see the ad for that?
I looked this up the other day because I started wondering whatever happened to this thing, too. Apparently, they just said, turns out building a big new architecture from scratch is kind of hard, so, we're just going to send it to the printer division, and they might be able to use memristors. So, there may be an HP Enterprise copier out there somewhere with a memristor.
Yeah, I think, Tom, so you think it's level 4 on the machine. I think it might be level 4, too.
Yeah.
Adam,
they were clearly deluding themselves in a big way.
Did you see the ad for the machine, Adam? Oh
no!
God.
No,
this is.
I gotta look this up.
If you are wondering, wow, I don't know, level 4, that's magical thinking. That's a pretty outrageous claim. It's all right, well, just that's fine. You sit through the ad, and then you tell me that they're only in exaggerated returns or marketing claims. They're all wearing Star Trek costumes, hailing. Yeah, it's bad. And I think even the memristor is you got to kind of put in. The kind of, the machine, I think, rises to magical thinking. The memristor is...
Oh, that thing is just... it's hard to determine the hype level of something that never actually existed.
Right.
Because if it's never existed, it is sort of by definition magical.
I also think that
I find it very hard to hype rank things that never actually ship. Like Optane, we can compare results against theory, but when you defund the project before you ship your first unit, it's just kind of like a 1/0 and we're undefined.
Right, we're nan on the hype scale. Yeah, there needs to be a nan over here, third level nan. So that's an interesting point. I do feel that one of the things that you see a lot in these things that get way overhyped is not providing technical detail. I'm going to provide you the emotion of a revolution, but not really the technical detail to support it. Not yet. It's coming, or it's a secret, or you have to sign an NDA. I feel like that's a common trend among these things that get just.
Okay, I mean, case in point there has got to be the results of the recent trial, right? I mean, I feel like you're talking about Theranos.
So you know what? I am actually not talking. I mean, obviously Theranos, for sure, yes.
Yes.
But actually what I have in mind is something that I think absolutely hit level 4, and that's the Segway.
That's a really interesting one. Because you're right that there was this brief feeling of ubiquity.
So do you remember?
Okay,
yes.
Hang on. The Segway is a level 4.
Oh God. Okay. Are you don't take this the wrong way, but where were you in 2000?
I was not in San Francisco by any stretch of the imagination. So I feel like you guys just have to upgrade.
No. This is not a San Francisco thing.
This is
not a San Francisco thing. This is this is a mesmerizing story. There is a great, and we'll link to it. There's a great podcast called Dakota Ring. Dakota Ring has got an episode on who killed the Segway. It's part of an article about talking about the Segway. So what happened on the Segway is invented by Dean Kamen, who's amazing, a really interesting technologist. Also, a couple screws loose. I don't think I'm not saying that pejoratively, but it's got some wild ideas. Dean Kamen has this idea for what becomes the Segway, but also is paranoid that it is going to be taken by someone else. So they have absolute secrecy. And what they do is they signed someone was writing a book about the Segway, and they were pitching this book proposal, but they would not give any details about what it actually was. And then that book proposal got leaked, and there was a very brief period of time. This is not a Silicon Valley thing. This is the whole country went cuckoo for what is this thing? This is and I think to put it in modern terms, this is I don't know, maybe Elon Musk, or I don't know, what would be the example of where someone today would be I've got an idea. And you've got I remember Steve Jobs saying that this is more important than the bicycle. I believe it was Jeff Bezos saying, or maybe it was Bob Metcalf saying it was going to be bigger than the internet. So Matt, this is not just an inside the 101 kind of thing. This went loco. And then there's a great moment, which I had actually read about but not heard until listening to this podcast, where Diane Sawyer, so they go to announce this thing on the Today program or whatever on ABC, and they do this unveiling, and it's the Segway. And Diane Sawyer, who they really should have briefed on what it was before it, because she could not. She's like, "Is that it? That's not it. That's that." No, she's literally "That's not what we're waiting for. Bring out the thing that the entire nation is waiting for." So no, I'm not making this up. I know I sound like this sounds like a vivid dream, but this actually happened.
Okay, Brian. In terms of other, I think, magical thinking, maybe utopian futures, I was thinking back to my childhood, and tell me if this rings a bell. Because there was a period in the early 90s when we thought that maglev trains were going to be everywhere, and that power was going to be free. And all of this came, I think, because of these either false or falsified conclusions about cold fusion.
Yeah.
in like 1989, I believe.
Yes. I don't know how much. I mean, that's the Utah group, the cold fusion group. And I don't know how much of that, but there's definitely a lot of enthusiasm, and there still is a lot of enthusiasm around nuclear fusion. But yes, it was definitely fever pitch. I feel the 70s and 80s. I mean, other folks can kind of chime in here, but yeah, infinite free power was definitely something we were going to have.
That's right, and then the magical thinking surrounding that, and like all of the things that it would enable that it never could.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, cold fusion was a specific hype thing for a few years, but just turned out to be bad science, I think. But every time there's some energy breakthrough, you get this utopia cycle.
Yeah, when I think it's kind of interesting because Adam, I know you read The Codebreaker recently, and I'm reading it now. Interesting book. Certainly, the underlying science is super interesting of CRISPR. I kind of feel like the Human Genome Project is a little bit in the overhyped category. I mean, I would love a molecular biologist weigh in on that, but it seems like that kind of bit overhyped.
Yeah, certainly from the Codebreaker book, it seems like it was a huge expense, a lot of hype, certainly exaggerated returns in that I don't think it turned out to be particularly useful, or perhaps some of the technology that spun out of it was useful, but concretely it was quickly deprecated, that data set.
And I think that also it highlights, the Human Genome Project highlights something that happens in this kind of level 3 of utopian futures, where people begin to think, oh, with this technology, I can do this. And something that clearly the technology cannot do. And people thought that the Human Genome Project would allow us to do all sorts of things. That's like, no, we're not. All we are doing is disassembling all of the instructions of the program. We have no idea how the program works, and that's an exaggeration, obviously. But there's a lot that we do just by sequencing all the nucleotide base pairs does not mean that we've actually cracked the code on all this stuff. But people were clearly drawing that inference, and it's kind of our responsibility as technologists to kind of reel people back in at that moment, and it can be tough, actually. Adam, surely you have been with someone talking about something that dtrace can do that it cannot, in fact, do.
You mean they're saying it, or I'm saying it? Hopefully it's them.
Right. No, I mean, they're saying it.
I think probably both of them.
Exactly. Right.
Did I push that?
Right. Well, that depends if you are merely in level 2 of exaggerated claims. That would be you, or level 3. That's them. But I mean, have you have been around people who are saying, "Oh, I can do this with this," and you're like, "You can't actually."
Yes, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. You hear technology pushed into areas where it's being misapplied, or people are drawing the wrong inferences. That one of the questions I had was, how can we tell when we're part of this hype cycle and magical thinking? When you're, if I've got my 3,000 person space where I am talking about, HODL and how it's going to the moon, how can I hear myself there? And how can we identify, what are the shibboleths of these hype cycles and identify?
Yeah, how do you know you're in one? Sorry, Todd, go ahead. I didn't even try to get in here.
We're talking about several different types of hype cycles here, right? I mean, you're talking about technology hype cycles and also the Human Genome Project. I guess on your comments on the Human Genome Project, I would point out that's funded science, right? So yeah, sure, it just maps the human genome, but that was pretty novel at the time. And a lot of these other things you're talking about wouldn't be here without that project. And I guess, I mean, to some extent, they have to hype it to get it funded by Congress, right?
Yeah, this is a good point. This is a good point. This is a good point.
If you don't do that, it never happens, and none of this happens.
That's
right?
And
so that is part of the hype cycle.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I don't know.
And I'll throw a
too.
second counterpoint in there, right? Human Genome Project itself did not deliver anywhere near what it promised, but it turns out gene sequencing is kind of useful.
Totally. Totally. And Todd, you're making a very good point about that there's a degree to which you have to point people to a distant future to get them excited about the sacrifices they need to make in the present. Am I phrasing that? I'm trying to phrase that in the most charitable possible way.
Yeah, and you have to keep you have to motivate Congress to the point where they allocate enough money for now, so they keep allocating money over time. Because if you told them the full cost of the thing that you're proposing, they would never fund it.
Right.
And it is a very delicate balance. Like, I mean, I don't know. I work at a laboratory where we are working on fusion, and we've had some gains recently, and we've had some hype cycles in the past that didn't turn out that great. And I mean, it's still going lower key than it was in the past, and I think there could be some big gains. I don't think they'll be as big as what it was hyped initially, but I think it'll be pretty cool.
So, okay, so Todd, tell me about that. That's really interesting.
Wait, thorium's not going to save us all?
That's right. But so tell me about that, because I think that one thing I think you do see is for people that survive one of these big hype booms and busts, they are much more sensitive about not making exaggerated claims. Is that true where you are in terms of the fusion space?
I think it. Yeah, I mean, there was. So for people who don't know, I work at Lawrence Livermore. We have NIF, the biggest laser in the world. It's the size of 3 football fields. It has 192 beams. It fires at something the size of a BB and implodes it. And it's a little piece of deuterium. There have been different. I mean, NIF has been going since the late 90s or something. And like I said, they've had to keep the budget going. They finally got ignition this year. It was, less dramatic than we thought it was going to be. I mean, basically what that means is they got energy out of the capsule more than what they put in with the lasers. Not more than what they put in with the whole facility, but there was actually fusion burn in the middle of the thing, and energy came out, which is cool.
That's very cool. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's a big deal because now it's in a controlled environment. They can experiment with it. More things can happen. I think there was definitely when I first started at the lab maybe 13 years ago, there was a lot of hype around NIF for energy and like the LIFE program, if people ever heard about that, where they were going to build reactors out of this thing. There were reactor designs that came out of it and stuff like that. There was sort of a timeline. There was a deadline for ignition. Everybody was hyping that shortly after the machine came online. Didn't hit that. And then after that, I think there was sort of a real negative reaction and kind of a backlash to a lot of the hype that was coming out around energy. And basically what happened is that the focus of the machine, it sort of has 3 purposes. One is sort of astrophysics research, one is energy, and the other is weapons research. It got pulled back into weapons research after that. And the interesting thing about that is that focus actually helped, because those are the people who know how to make fusion happen. Because there's one place where it does work.
Yeah, right. So, one place where we actually have demonstrated it. Yeah, right.
Right. And so I think, ultimately that was helpful, but, there's, I don't know. I don't know how to evaluate all of that. I mean, I think it was certainly out of control at some point or another, but on the other hand, did it get funding? Yeah. Did it keep the thing going? Did it help? I think ultimately it'll be a valuable thing, and it's a lot less expensive than some other things that we do. So I don't know. I think ultimately you have to sort of take it on balance. Like we face the same thing with supercomputers.
Yeah.
I mean, people complain about LinPack as a benchmark all the time, and it's totally valid. Real apps don't look like LinPack. They don't just do flops all the time. On the other hand, LinPack boils down to one number that you can tell to Congress, and you can compare to China and Russia. Right. And you can say, our number is smaller than theirs, therefore we need more money. Right. And that helps keep things funded, right? So there's a huge balance there that has to be struck. So I can see both sides of it.
Well, sure. Totally. And it is this challenge to really sell people on a vision for the future, get them to endure with you when it's stumbling, and at the same time not succumb to getting things overhyped. It's a really hard balance to strike. And I think that I don't know that fusion ever. I think that there was a time when fusion felt inevitable, to me anyway, as a moron kid. It felt like it just felt like the progress of things. Adam, you're talking about maglev trains. It felt like that was going to be the what progress would yield. And then there was a period of time where it's like, okay, actually, maybe that's never going to happen. But now it feels like, well, if it could happen, it would be. And Todd, I imagine this is the tenor at the lab that boy, if this could happen, this would be humanity changing. but it's really hard.
I think every generation goes through a cycle of fusion utopia. I mean, I think I've seen about 3 of them now.
And Tom, are you using fusion utopia as a metaphor there, or do you mean actual fusion utopia?
Actual fusion utopia.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Well,
so
it
you
would
asked
solve a lot of
about
problems.
signs that something's getting hyped.
Yeah.
I think it's usually a bad sign when people start, naming their companies after the hype cycle. So something like blockchain iced tea, that's a bad sign. So I'm curious what all you think about, say, the Rust programming language in a company that may or may not be named for it.
Oh, that would just disgust me. Honestly, that would be so ridiculously
pandering.
Pandering, absolutely.
That's
that company would be doomed. I find that question like nauseating. I can't, let alone the answer. Just
to jump on that kind of hype cycle.
Oh my God, how ridiculous! No, absolutely. No, this is fair. I would like to believe that we are but a tip of the hat. Actually, Rust is kind of interesting.
So you would say there are no Rust utopians?
There are no. Well, so I actually don't think that there are. So this is going to be okay. I'm going to maybe I am going to be proving myself to be a case study of how you don't realize when you're inside of a hype cycle, but I feel that Rust is actually very boots on ground. And the reason that I've actually been surprised at how good Rust has been for just how many different kinds of jobs. And part of the reason for that is that Rust is very reverential of history. So there are a lot of things that it has learned from the things that have come before it. And I feel in a lot of these things that have failed, they haven't learned from the things that came before it. And, Adam, to your question, I feel like when things are not looking at what came before it to really understand them, I mean, you don't want to be incarcerated by the past, but you also when you're totally oblivious of it, it is problematic. And I felt like we've seen this in a couple of different times where people have been absolutely oblivious and then they just repeat the same mistakes. So, and I do not think that Rust is overhyped for whatever it's worth. Silence.
I'm with you. I was just trying to think about, is that what we would say if we were part of the hype cycle, if we were part of the problem? And certainly, if you go to the Rust blog or the Rust language guide or any of these things, they won't tell you it's the right answer for all problems for all people. Although, plenty of its adherents will. So, just because the main, although you go to the Web3 Foundation website, which I did for the first time today, you will, sorry, I just wasted 6 hours of your life now. But yeah, I mean, there is a certain humility there.
Right. I mean, the company naming phenomenon is mostly to take advantage of less sophisticated investors, right? Whereas there would be an argument to be made that you had trouble getting money from sophisticated investors. So, I don't know if the Oxide naming scheme really was a ploy to get money,
I think we can say with absolute confidence that that it was not done to get our investors. I don't think really, certainly not our institutional investors.
Or how about this? It was, if it was successful, it was only mildly so.
That's right. That's right.
Brian, I had another question about a hype cycle that you were part of, and I'm just going to give a little bit of history because this is about dtrace, and dtrace obviously achieved. I'm very proud of what we did with dtrace, but back to when I joined Sun in 2001, what I heard from I think you were underway by the point building dtrace, but what I heard was that dtrace first existed as pages in yours and Mike's notebook for like at least a few years, and that there was a little bit of a hype cycle, at least in the Starless kernel group, where problems would come up. And say, dtrace is going to solve that.
Yes.
So
that is true.
What level do you think it achieved? Was it to the point of othering? Debuggers that might have existed.
I like the fact that you're giving me the choices you're giving me are level 5,
magical thinking, or
level
othering.
5, or a different kind of level 5. I mean, level 5 or level 4. What do you think you were at personally?
Well, and because even though I think at least some, if not all, of the claims were eventually backed up. I think there was, it was kind of a meme at the time. Although we didn't have memes back then, we just had stories told on our grandfather's knee. Yes,
exactly. We wore an onion on our belt. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think actually, but this goes to kind of to a part of Todd's point too, that like. I think the difference is like we never misrepresented that we had not yet written a single line of code. But it was definitely magical thinking. Certainly utopian, no question. Quite arguably magical thinking. Was it othering? I hear what you're saying there. I feel that this is a little bit of an intervention. Maybe.
Like did Mike go and kill other projects?
Well,
not
boy,
impossible.
Yeah, geez. This is the most aggressive and annoying form of hype. Notably, the time of arrival is less important at this level, simply that the technology will arrive at some point in the future. I gotta say, like reading that paragraph, like that does feel awfully on the nose. I know that because ultimately we were insufferable about it. In particular, a senior colleague was working on a problem and was complaining about not being able to debug it. And I did helpfully volunteer. I'm like, dtrace does actually solve. I actually said dtrace does solve that problem for you. Use the present tense, which is ridiculous. And this is Tim Marsland, who is not necessarily prone to blow-ups, but definitely blew up at me in his very dignified English way, telling me that I needed to go write dtrace. That's all. So I think
it seems fair.
It was,
and the use of the present tense does kind of put you in some of the upper echelons.
Upper echelons. I think we can definitely see we have left behind level 2 and probably level 3. We are definitely. It is a level 4 versus level 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I don't know if it's a good one, but it's self-contained at least. At least we weren't telling too many people outside of the reservation.
Well, I do, and I think that's it. I think that you gotta the challenge and the balance is you gotta make clear that no, we haven't done actually any of this. Like this is all something I think is possible, and I do think that things really, because another big one and a big bust is nanotechnology. And Aaron, you were using by your metric of companies named. There were definitely plenty of companies that had to rename themselves because nanotech was such a big bust. And are you, Adam? Did you like the Carrick Drexler stuff? Did you?
No. I think this one completely washed over me.
Oh my God, this was, and so the idea was, and this goes back to a Feynman kind of quip, that we could build robots that would build smaller robots. This is kind of like a Wingian singularity for small robots. And the idea then is that we would build these nano machines, these molecular scale machines, and then the pitch, especially made to generals and admirals, was that it would be weaponized. And because the big proponent of this, Eric Drexler, was infamous for saying that a cow is just a machine that turns grass into steak. So we can make a machine that turns you into gray goo. Gray goo was have you ever heard of the term gray goo? This
yes.
is okay, yeah, right. So we're going to build a machine that's going to turn into gray goo. And it's which of course, everyone, the military gets very excited about this, turning everyone into gray goo apparently is what they want to go do. But it does seem okay, this seems plausible. And I remember reading the book Nanotechnology by Eric Drexler. And I got 3/4 through the book before I realized, wait a minute, none of this is real. This is all just stuff that maybe we could do. And that was not featured very prominently on the tin, I would say.
Well, the interesting thing about nanobots is nobody ever mentioned where you would hide the software inside of them.
Right. Where's the firmware?
Right. It's firmware will figure it out.
Firmware will figure it out. And
how do I firmware update this killbot?
Quickly. But my right leg is gray goo and my left leg is going fast. Yeah, no, there were lots of practical problems, as it turns out. And that was, Todd, that was an example of, trying to use hype to get funding and interest. And it definitely succeeded on by that metric. but by not representing where it was properly, it allowed people to get way ahead of themselves. And then it was such a deep bust that was, I don't know where it is now. I guess people just haven't heard of it now. But that was a term that you literally could not use. I mean, that became a scarlet letter.
I mean, nanotech is still somewhat around. They've been able to do some interesting things. It just turns out you can't build robots with it.
You can't build robots with it. I would say expert systems is another one. Of the kind of the AI winter of the 80s, the expert systems were going to save us all. And that
people got really into microcomputers, and we'll see whether that Microsoft company actually goes anywhere.
Right, exactly. Well, exactly. Like plenty of the stuff actually like lives up to it. I did have a couple of others that I want to make sure that I get out there. Actually, went back and read First Round, the VC company, polled their founders, asking their founders what they thought the most overhyped domains were, most overhyped sectors were. And they started doing this in 2015. The most overhyped sectors in 2015 included cryptocurrency, ironically enough, AR, which I think AR/VR, which I think is definitely one of those things that's been, I don't know. We'll have to talk about that one separately. I don't know how you kind of chalk that one up, because there's a lot that's real there and a lot that's not yet where people think it's going. And then the other one, and Adam, this is one I wanted to bounce off you because I don't think I remember this. Chatbots.
Yeah, I think chatbots were like weirdly huge. I mean, still are something, but yeah, my last company, there was this I went to the Slack conference. I mean, obviously, like they're going to be filled with different vendors, but there were tons of different vendors, all who wanted to show up with their own both ML based chatbot, natural language chatbot, and this is both for like chat ops, but also for when you DM Mr. Peanut and tell them about your allergic reaction or whatever it is, like having replacing humans with these chatbots. Yeah.
Has anyone ever met a chatbot that they like?
There's an alarmingly large number of companies that still think this is an okay way to interact with customers.
But is this but this is like a sector. This is what I didn't realize. This is like I mean, Adam, you were at like ChatbotCon.
Yes, I was at Baimon ChatbotCon. and yeah, I mean, I agree, Matt, that it persists. But there was this summer of chatbots or whatever, where it did feel like this was going to be a much bigger thing. I don't know about. I'm trying to taxonomize it.
My bigger objection is that in 2020 to 2022, they are still continuing to proliferate.
And where are our chatbots? Our chatbots, are we magical thinking on this?
We were promised, and they will not stop until they turn the entire internet into chatbot gray goo. And it seems to be contagious between electronics vendors.
I just had no idea that this is like a sector. I mean, can you imagine? Do you get the titans, the chatbot titans together, like big chatbot? It's like, you're wondering why I called you on here.
We'll get into othering where there's nothing left on the internet except chatbots.
Well, okay. So Dan Olson, who did have this great 2-hour video on this kind of NFT takedown over the weekend, he did report getting into discords where chatbots are trying to sell Bitcoin to other chatbots. So I do think that this is the Vingian singularity is going to happen with chatbots, I guess.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, all right. So that was a sector. That is not the founders from circa 2015 from First Round are not wrong. There are chatbot companies. And then what happened to the chatbot companies? Are they still around?
I think that a lot of them are still around. I mean, they're the powering the pop-ups that whenever you go to any web page, it's like, hey, I saw you've been on my web page for 30 milliseconds. Can I sell you something? Those are all powered by chatbots.
Okay, I've got another one to ask you about, and this is prompted by Aaron talking about when companies name themselves after a trend. Serverless. Where's serverless in all this?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because clearly real, I mean, but also clearly in the exaggerated claims department, I would assume, and not utopian. I mean, you've got to say there's some utopian futures around serverless.
I think that's right. I mean, because I even almost wonder if it went to level 4 to magical thinking, because there was this snake oil of serverless as this panacea that like
Right.
the problem with your microservices environment is like too much state, and somehow serverless will cure you of the need for state, and of like notional scaling, and so I mean, maybe I was hanging out with the wrong kind of nerds, because I certainly was like, I was very interested in Lambda and functions and all the different flavors of this.
So there's definitely there's a lot that's real there. It's just it got over its skis, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's like we can't all be stateless services. Like at some point, like you can't just pass the buck infinitely.
Well, the rest are on the blockchain.
Right. Just ask the chatbot. I mean, I feel like that's it. Like, can we somehow combine the various hype cycles into like a supercell of
and then name a company after it.
And then name
I like where you're going. Yeah,
exactly. So then the other, just from drawing from a deeper past, when you were talking about Intel, I didn't know Intel's done a couple of these. I wasn't sure if you were going to go Optane or Itanium, IA64. Yeah. You got to put that one in and VOIW more generally.
Yeah. So I'm trying to place exactly the time of the Optane hype cycle, and it's got to be sort of like very late 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. Is that right?
On Itanium?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would say Itanium, and I would say it reaches its peak with like the Monterey, and this is SCO and IBM and Intel, I guess, on their. I would say 99 is going to be the peak IA64, and this is where I got that. I bought this is one of my most treasured possessions. My book on IA64 that has the graph of the adoption of IA64. And in 2020, it was going to be the late adopters in agriculture that were going to be adopting IA64.
Well, they still have yet to adopt IA64 to their credit.
So I know I'm looking. I kind of, when I found this thing while moving, I kind of tweeted that out. I'm looking forward to the laggards in agriculture finally adopting IA64. FCOE.
Yeah.
The fiber channel over Ethernet. I feel like that got. I mean, maybe we were just in a little like closet where people were, where this was getting hyped. But if you were in the right spot, I thought this was getting definitely hyped.
Yeah,
I was creating the damn thing, but Cisco could have pushed it a lot further, but they just didn't want to.
It also, Tom, did you work on this? I thought FCOE just made no sense. I just, why would I?
It was a solution in search of a problem, it felt like.
Well,
okay. That I feel is also an interesting attribute of a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Is a solution as I'm just looking down the list, we got a lot of solutions in search of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one I was biggest into was ATM.
Yes.
It was definitely into the magical thinking, and maybe even othering, because there were definitely personal wars going on between ATM and non-ATM world.
There definitely was, right? And that red herring cover with Andy Bechtolsheim on the red herring cover of Death to ATM, I remember very vividly.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, obviously, like, you don't run that as a cover if there's not othering going on, for sure.
Hey, regarding FCOE, do you remember a company that took the success of FCOE and made it was like SATA over Ethernet or something like that? It was like anyway. It was
yes,
that was ATA over Ethernet.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Which made a certain amount of sense too. And there was a SCSI over Ethernet from Singapore. But
the important thing about all these is, it's an argument that you only need the one cable. You need power, and then you need the cable that you talk to other things. And you don't need a fiber channel cable and ATA cables and serial ports and all this other stuff hanging off the back. I think that's important.
It's all about cabling in terms of the problem.
Well, and like a lot of this stuff, it seems like was not wrong. It was just early, which, I mean, if you're Wall Street, they're the same thing. But like NVMe over fabrics seems to be pretty legitimate at risk of being shot down by, The
other example is RDMA transiting from InfiniBand to Ethernet. So that's a legitimate thing now. But Cisco could have pushed FCOE, but they had a fiber channel switch business to protect, and they didn't want to lose that.
Yeah, and I think NVMe OF I think I think it's legit, Matt. I think you're in a safe space with respect to NVMe OF.
Okay, good. I know that like Oxide's still doing direct attached SSDs to your processors, and I wasn't sure if I was getting shouted down by a mob for saying NVMe over Fabric, but
direct attached NVMe, but yeah, and I think so. Actually, where are SmartNICs in all of this? Are SmartNICs in the? I have a.
SmartNICs are legitimately extant.
But do you think that SmartNICs are succumbing to exaggerated claims at all?
They're suffering from the fact that they're usually FPGA adjacent and therefore a real pain in the ass to program.
Right, fair, okay.
But if you are trying to do some hypervisor level functions like segmenting NVMe or VLANing, etc., and you're willing to put in a little bit of time on some generic code, Amazon got great returns out of them in the beginning just because they could arbitrage the price between ARM and x86, right? But I could see these being real to real people and not just Amazon.
Yeah, I think so too. No, I agree.
Well, my theory is it's a lot more real if you think of them if you rename it to be front end processors, which existed forever.
Right. SSL offload is just probably the easiest one, just because they do a lot of it.
Right.
The internet started that way with a dedicated processor that was doing the network stuff and then handing it to the computer.
Yes, and certainly that has been a cycle that I think we are absolutely going to repeat, especially as we get kind of post Moore's Law here. Another one from Adam, and I think I saw you even making reference to this online, but Taogen and and Pink.
Yeah. I was thinking about that one because this is another one from when I was a kid, because I was a huge Mac booster. I went to the conferences and had Mac user magazines, which were ran to 300 pages, and I'd fill out the form to get free swag from companies and stuff. And so Apple, their next generation OS, they were building System 7, but then System 8, which they codenamed Pink or Copeland, was going to be the preemptive multitasking, next generation operating system that was the answer to everything. It was the coming messiah.
And that Taligent, the company that Apple and IBM set up as a portmanteau of talented and intelligent.
I'd forgotten that, but yes.
Which I feel is another red flag. We were talking about SmartNICs, Tom. You were saying that if they should rename themselves, and I say this is someone who worked on SmartOS but did not name it. That putting, I think, smart, intelligent, creative in your name is probably as much of a red flag as putting the name of your technology in your name. At least your company name, exactly.
It does demonstrate hubris.
It definitely. God, speaking of which, who would name a system that? God, that's just galling. I'd say. I think we got to most of the ones on my list. Another one for you, Adam. I think B.
Yeah, that was super well hyped. Where did it land in terms of the hype cycle? I don't know. Maybe a bit of a utopian future, especially because all of Apple's previous efforts had failed.
Yeah,
and so folks were actually getting desperate, and so it felt like the future that could not otherwise be delivered. I say this as the owner of 2 books on B programming and a stack that as a 16 of CDs that to install B that as a 16-year-old I lifted from their booth or something. I don't know. I apologize.
Did you go with me to the B bankruptcy auction? Were we there together?
Yes, I did. I got a mouse pad that was not part of the lot, and I know that I don't know if you still have those whiteboards.
I do not still have those whiteboards. So the whiteboards, there were and I bought I bought 12 whiteboards for $10. It was a lot of whiteboards for not very much money. And then do you recall that one of those whiteboards we could not erase?
That's right, because it had like their vNode architecture on it.
It had like a third of the BOS VFS architecture on it written in permanent marker. So you know that someone had like picked up a Sharpie thinking it was a dry erase marker. And I feel like I'm right there with you. I can feel it all happening in front of me. So I didn't tell you how that one ended. So when we moved, we lived on Potrero Hill, we were moving to Noy Valley. And Bridget is like, this whiteboard has got to go. I mean, it was a huge whiteboard that had a bunch of like stuff in part. I'm like, this is a historical art. Like, you can't just like, this is an important historical artifact. She's like, yeah,
so you donated it to the Computer History Museum?
I feel I did one better actually. What I did is I wrote the saga of this whiteboard on the whiteboard. I explained the whole thing, the bankruptcy auction, that it was from B, that here's this VFS architect, 1/3 of the VFS architecture that comes free with this free whiteboard. And I just like put it up on the street on Missouri there in Potrero Hill. And, God bless San Francisco, maybe 15 minutes later, we see a truck like slow down. Guy gets out, reads the whole whiteboard very thoughtfully. Is like, I can see him kind of like thinking to himself, like, and puts it in the truck and drives off. So I've got no idea what happened to the whiteboard, but I would like to believe that it's in a good home right now. Or at least somebody is arguing to not throw that thing out wherever it is.
That's right. It's being moved yet again.
It's being moved yet again. Exactly.
Yeah. When we were at that bankruptcy auction, I had turned down an offer from B maybe like 6 months before we went to that auction. So I felt pretty smart.
That's right. You were not actually being auctioned off. And you remember that I talked about other prized possessions, that I found a box that had an AT&T Hobbit manual in it and an Exponential X704 manual in it. So I'm like, I will bid, like, this is what I'm here for. And I will bid, how do I bid on this lot? And I'm thinking, like, I'm immediately doing the calculus of like, how much am I willing to pay for this thing? And it's like a lot. And I find the auctioneers, I can't find the lot number on it. And the auctioneer looks at it and looks at me and says, just take it. I was like, wow, okay. So
he's already been paid, not on commission.
Clearly not on commission. I think he's just like, box of crap. I'm like, all right, well, I would have paid a lot more for that. That's fine. Yeah, I will definitely take it.
Yeah.
But so yeah, B, I feel got into, I think some of that utopian futures and magical thinking, honestly.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, at least utopian future. I mean, because they were in such a dystopia at the time and there was no way out.
Yes. And when I think of that, this is one of these challenges. I mean, just going back to Todd's earlier point, is that like you do have to point people to a better future to get them excited to be involved in a nascent technology effort, to develop it, to fund it, to use it. Like you do have to get them out of like the present.
Thinking about it more, I think one of the key distinctions between 3 and 4 is interoperability with legacy systems. Right?
Interesting.
Like you once you say, "Oh, I'm Steve Jobs building the next machine, and it does not mount literally anything from anyone else anywhere that has ever been written," this is just flipping magic at this point.
No, I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because you think about like the whole Web3 thing. You're like, no, we don't need to interact with we are banks. We actually replace the financial system. It's like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, woof. We're definitely goodbye level 4, hello level 5.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily the technology, producers itself who create that hype bubble. I was thinking about our previous shows, and we talked a lot about Docker. And like the Docker hype cycle was out of control. Right? Like, and in terms of venture money and so forth, both in Docker and anything in its ecosystem. And there was at least a utopian future there, if not magical thinking. But I think a lot of it, at least initially, didn't come from Docker themselves, or at least they. I mean, maybe I'm rewriting history.
No. I
don't think that they were not advocating it in the way that their disciples started advocating it.
Well, so Docker is an interesting kind of use case, because what actually happening, people were actually using it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what was happening. It's like developers were downloading it and using it, and it was useful. And So then, like, the magical thinking around Docker or the utopian future was much more around the business that they would build rather than the tech. Because containers are still very much with us, right? I don't mean containers didn't.
Yeah, absolutely right. Right. The notion is clearly there, and like there's a real there. So I
mean,
think I have some questions
the
about
utopian, like it is the utopian future and all the ridiculous money that got thrown at Docker more just about the idea that for a while there was a very strong thought that you could make a lot of money off open source software somehow without an appreciable business plan.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And like that was more of a generic feature of the industry than a Docker specific, although there's certainly the elephant in the room.
Hold on. Are we the elephant? Who's the elephant? Is Oxide the elephant again? I just feel.
I mean, last I checked, you're selling hardware, right? You have
yes.
on serverless as Oxide.
Right. Yeah, that's right. We're going to pivot to serverless. Like, what?
Yeah, it's for your stateless services.
Okay, we are attaching them to weather balloons so you can run in the cloud. It's perfect.
Exactly. I think so, Matt. That's an interesting point. Is that the actual the hype was not around Docker per se. It was caught up in a larger hype bubble around funding of open source projects effectively as VC funded businesses. And that definitely got it. When you think of these things as VC funded businesses, you get into a lot. Yes, you definitely get into a lot of level 3, level 4.
Yeah, the alchemy of converting GitHub stars into dollars.
Yes.
That felt like there was certainly some magical thinking there.
Yes.
I mean, especially on the basis that most people who are running open source software tend to be incredibly cheap.
So I was actually talking to one of the VCs who invested in Docker, and I was saying, one of the things I think is kind of interesting as a developer myself, that what I like to use are the technologies that I know are unmonetizable, because I don't want to discover that we need to go pay royalties for some. I mean, I'm not going to use proprietary software in part because we can't afford to have royalties at the base of our technology stack. A lot of developers are pretty similar. And so if, as an investor, if you are seeking out those things that are being used by developers, if that's your metric, it feels conceivable to me that you are gravitating to those things that are tautologically unmonetizable.
But that's part of where the hype from Docker came from. There is a belief in the industry that developers have no budget, but ops has large budgets. And Docker was like, great, we can make the developers fall in love with us, and then the ops guys actually pay for us.
So how did this VC take that, Brian?
Nervous laughter. And then I was kind of like laughing along. And then do you think that could be true? I'm like, I definitely think that could be true. Yeah, I think it could be true. Sure.
Eric, to your point, I mean, I think they're looking for the Trojan horse, right? These cheapskate developers take the thing that is free and easy, and then somehow you can use that to roll in and spring out with your salespeople.
And the only way that I can think of to be able to do that is to do something like Oracle does with VirtualBox and its extension pack, which is just like completely a Trojan horse and also makes everyone hate the product once they find out about it.
It's not good.
DynaDB, your first key value store is free.
Your second one is not.
Well, in some sense, Red Hat screwed up the industry by being successful, so people think they can replicate that somehow.
Red Hat's core strength was showing up at a time when Linux really freaking sucked and making it suck a little bit less.
And disrupting proprietary Unix, right? Then it was x86 disrupting the risk vendors, and there's a lot that's going on there. I do feel that this is an important point, Tom, that you're making, because people looked to Red Hat as the model, and there's this kind of assumption that Red Hat did this, we can do this. And I do feel that this is one of those things you get at that level 5 stage where people start kind of weaponizing history. And it's like, no, you're on the wrong side of this. And certainly, I mean, God, the number of times that folks that are asking tough questions about Web3 are being portrayed as critics of the internet. It's like, no, that is actually not what happened at all. But I think that there is this kind of idea that like, no, because this thing succeeded, therefore that implies that all possible things can succeed. It's like, no, that is not what it implies. All right, well, I think we got a good. I think this has been a good tour of hype. I want to go see. What I'm wondering is who won the big Mr. Peanut account for among the big chatbot. I'm wondering that's. I want to go DM Mr. Peanut, apologize for muting him, and see if I can figure out who's the
who that vendor is. That marquee vendor.
that vendor is. Adam,
I'm disappointed we didn't touch on 5G.
Do you feel that 5G?
Yeah, we got to come out there.
Okay, we'll end on 5G. Is 5G? I feel like 5G has been a long time coming. I can't tell is 5G overhyped. Can someone?
Oh, God. And it's the same damn playbook as 4G and 3G, and it's basically we need more bandwidth, so we're going to hype this to the moon, and none of it makes any sense. But more bandwidth would be nice.
Well, I mean, hang on. Some of this makes sense, right? You can go and you can take spectrum and you can divide it up more finely as opposed to the comically large chunks that LTE did. And so you can plausibly fit more people into the same amount of space. That part is true. This is what they call 5G FR1, which is basically the low frequency bands of it, where you take 4G and like if you're T-Mobile, it's a software update.
The technology is great. It's the hyping that's out of control. What the end user gets is more bandwidth for cheaper, maybe someday.
So, Tom, could you explain to me how the canceling of scheduled flights for the 5G rollout? Like, I feel like, is that real? I mean, is that like
That's the FAA being a bunch of.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this is like. Yeah,
that's the same thing as not being able to power on your phones on the plane. They haven't proven decisively that it could not cause harm, and therefore they ban it.
Right. That just seems like a very weird eddy in this particular hype cycle on 5G. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it on 5G. I don't know, unless you got any parting thoughts.
Nope. That's all the hype I can stomach for one night.
All the hype you can stomach. But I think this has been good. It's been a good tour. And you got to go watch that machine ad. I'm telling you.
Yeah. I got it queued right after this.
All right.